Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome back to YPN News, bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. We have several really interesting articles today showing fulfillment of Bible prophecy, but even more interesting is the fact that Yeshua Hawkins spoke of these events prior to them taking place. Now we have research coming out, Katan, showing the confusion in the mind is very real, and it can actually be seen affecting certain portions of the brain. We're also going to look at how the Syrian conflict is expanding. Another nation joined in there. We have a report indicating that Pope Benedict is returning to the Vatican. And Catania, this one is particularly interesting to me because if you remember, just a few months ago, Yeshua Hawkins mentioned that Pope Benedict wasn't just going to retire somewhere and we wouldn't hear from him again. He said that we are now going to have two active popes working side by side, and this article shows that that looks like exactly what we see taking place here. So very interesting.
Amazing. Wow. But first we're going to turn our attention over to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who is reporting on what many people are calling a house of horrors. Larry, in light of the ongoing debate over abortion, how are government officials, how are they responding to this case?
Amazing news out of Philadelphia this week, where some government officials, in at least one case, are actually viewing and referring to abortion as murder. Dr. Gosnell's abortion clinic is now closed, but the claims of what was occurring inside before its closure are about as morally repulsive as it gets. Babies being murdered after the mothers were induced into labor. One of the prosecutors described one of the many instances where a baby had actually been born onto a cold steel table and thereafter murdered when an abortionist stabbed the infant in the neck with a pair of scissors and then severed its spinal cord. The prosecutor says that was just plain homicide. A scathing grand jury report alleges that 72-year-old Gosnell and his staff potentially murdered hundreds of children and what he calls snippings to ensure fetal demise. Detailed records were never kept, so Dr. Gosnell is only accused of murdering 7 children, born still alive, and as far as 8 months into their lives. The same report also alleges a multitude of horrific health violations where Gosnell over-medicated his patients with dangerous pharmaceuticals and punctured holes in their wombs and bowels. One young patient who attributes an infection to having received an abortion at Gosnell's clinic says that during her time there, she saw blood on the table where the doctor kept his utensils, and he is also being charged with the murder of an adult as well, a 41-year-old woman who died of an anesthetic overdose during a second trimester abortion. Most heart-wrenching to consider is the fact that Dr. Gosnell's abortion clinic and the Women's Medical Society had been in practice since 1979. The question for many people now is, how could this have continued for so long without generating any complaints to state authorities? In fact, however, there were many reports, but the government failed to appropriately act on them. The Pennsylvania Department of Health conducted inspections as far back as 1989 and repeatedly found health violations in the clinic, but never ensured that they were corrected. The grand jury report also asserts that the medical examiner for Delaware County informed the department that Gosnell had performed an illegal abortion on a 14-year-old girl carrying a 30-week-old child. They also received official notice of the 41-year-old woman's death, for which Dr. Gosnell now faces a murder charge. None of these incidents, however, were sufficient to compel the department to investigate. The report also states that in 1993, because of political reasons, the Department of Health stopped inspecting all abortion clinics in the state. There were additional agencies which also failed to properly investigate. The Pennsylvania Department of State, through its Board of Medicine, received a complaint a decade ago from a former employee which laid out the entire scope of Dr. Gosnell's operation. The unsterile conditions, the unlicensed workers, the unsupervised sedation, and the underage abortion patients. In response, they did assign an investigator who interviewed Gosnell, but shockingly, they did not decide to inspect his clinic, and eventually the complaints were dismissed. Gosnell's slaughterhouse, masquerading as a clinic, was eventually shut down, not because of child murder, but for drugs. The federal government raided his office after receiving reports of illegal prescriptions of oxytocin and other painkillers that reportedly brought him hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. The federal police were horrified at the conditions they found inside the clinic. This photo shows some of the unsanitary conditions, and officials are also said to have found the body parts of some children. Dr. Gosnell is now on trial and is pled not guilty. His lawyer maintains that his client was merely providing a service, an argument which many people believe must and can only mean and refer to the multi-billion-dollar biotech and other industries which purchase and profit from aborted remains. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Gatan Jeff, back to you.
Either way it goes, it still appears like it's murder. Now, talk about the inherited traits being passed from one generation to the next. A new book written by Adrian Raine, a professor of criminology and psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania, reveals certain biological factors tend to make a young person violent. The book is called The Anatomy of Violence, The Biological Roots of Crime. He explains what makes a person want to kill is because some might be born that way.
Professor Raine said it's not just the social environment, there's genes. There's biological factors like a low resting heart rate and factors really early on in life that can really raise the odds that a kid could become a criminal, like a mom who smokes during pregnancy or takes alcohol or even poor nutrition during pregnancy. We know that these early factors predispose, Professor Raine said, some little innocent kids to become violent criminal offenders.
Interesting. He continued, I'm a scientist here looking at these early factors that make some of us more antisocial or criminal. And so at some level, should we cut some of these offenders a bit of slack because they're not responsible for the mother drinking during pregnancy?
Now, Professor Raine also studied the brains of 41 killers and found similarities between them, particularly with the frontal region of the brain, the part that's involved in planning regulation. His research concluded the frontal region is not functioning well in murderers. He described this area as the region that puts the brakes on certain behavior, similar to the brakes on a car. The brakes are worn out, the car can go out of control.
Right. He went on to explain the frontal region of the brain controls our emotions when we get angry and we want to lash out. It's the frontal cortex that puts the brakes on our actions. Professor Raine continued, the emotional part of the brain in some cold-blooded killers, that emotional part it's actually shrunken. It's a lot smaller than the normal brain. And that's the part that gives us the fear of punishment and also the feeling for what is right and what's wrong. These psychopaths don't have those feelings, and that's why they do what they do.
Interesting. Now, a scary incident for the passengers aboard a Norwegian Airlines Airbus that was returning to Russia from an Egyptian resort. The passenger jet had to maneuver around what may have been a rocket fired as they flew over Syria. Now, details are still sketchy at the moment, but reports from Russian officials confirm the jet faced some sort of danger, but it's unclear exactly just what the danger was.
Sounds scary. The pilots themselves have reported seeing some sort of potential military action which they felt could be a danger to the plane and had reportedly had to take evasive actions. Now, the airbus, along with the 157 passengers on board, landed safely at its destination. Russian officials have said they are going to investigate the issue and try to get to the bottom of it.
Continuing in the heated area of the Middle East, U.S. officials and Western intelligence are reviewing data indicating that Israel has conducted airstrikes in Syria. The Lebanese are reporting 16 Israeli fighter jets over Lebanese airspace coming into Lebanon, violating their airspace, heading towards the Syrian border.
U.S. officials aren't confirming these airstrikes, and neither are the Israelis. They're remaining pretty tight-lipped about this. Israel did release a statement saying, "We will do whatever is necessary to stop the transfer of weapons to terrorist organizations. We have done it in the past, and we will do it in the future." Officials believe that the Israeli position is that they will strike at Syria if they see weapons being transferred from Syria to Hezbollah forces in Lebanon.
Also, despite the fact that there has been reports that Syria has used chemical weapons in the continuing violence in the area, officials do not have any indications that any chemical weapons were involved or any chemical facilities were struck in these recent attacks. Now, it is also believed that Israeli forces didn't enter Syrian airspace to carry out these attacks. Typically, they can stay outside the Syrian airspace and shoot into it.
Now, question that I have for you as we move just a little bit further northwest from Israel is, what would you think if you moved into a new place and the former resident came and moved back in? Well, that's exactly what occurred at the Vatican as Pope Emeritus Benedict made his way back to his old place of residence, just a mere 2 months after leaving the Vatican and saying that he would live out his remaining days in prayer hidden from the world. It didn't last very long.
Well, at any other time in history of the Catholic Church, the prospects of 2 popes serving at the same time would provoke fears of a schism. Although many don't see Benedict's return as such, there are concerns as to what kind of influence his presence could have. There was no transcript of their meeting and no word as to whether Francis and Benedict will meet to discuss church issues.
No, but if they do want to talk, Benedict's new residence is at a restored convent, which is a mere 15-minute walk from Francis's guest house that he has chosen to live in instead of the grandeur of the papal apartment. Benedict admits being weakened by age, but he denied rumors of failing health. The two are traditionalists and share many of the same views, such as gay rights, abortion, and other ethical issues.
Well, finally, we bring you back to the Americas, South America, in Venezuela. A fistfight broke out at a national assembly over a law that would silence opponents of the new president, Nicolas Maduro. He is a protege of the late Hugo Chavez and won a disputed election last month.
Now, we're going to show you a video, and some of you it might be disturbing, but we want you to see this, how these political leaders are actually conducting themselves. Take a look at this.
Zona en los municipios San Francisco y Maracaibo, y que podrán prolongarse la zona industrial y Maracaibo. De igual forma, se estarán aprobando 126 millones más, un total de 266 millones.
Well, and to think that these are the people responsible for making decisions for the country. Now, Jeff, just to put it bluntly, it seems like this world is in a crazy, mixed-up mess, and they can't get themselves out of it. Even the leaders right now are openly showing their apparent lack of self-control. But they, with the rest of the world, they don't seem to know that they're even confused. Now, I guess that's why everybody needs a teacher. And Yisrael Hawkins has been doing just that, teaching this world that their ignoring of the laws written in the scriptures are leading them to misery, suffering, and eventually death. But he's also teaching the solution to turn this mess around and prevent it from occurring in the future. Simply teaching and following the laws written in the Holy Scriptures seems to be the key to mankind's survival, prosperity, and health.
Now, if you want to read about this prosperity and health, you can call, write, or email the House of Yahweh and request your free copy of the monthly newsletter or Prophetic Word magazine. You can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. or you can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit them at their website at www.yahweh.com or www.yisraelhawkins.com. You can email them at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Up next, Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And thank you for joining us.